Upon entering a cafe, a millionaire froze when he saw in the waitress the solution to a problem that 50 engineers couldn't solve. He walked up to her and... The morning sun cast long shadows across Echo Park as Natalie Rivera wiped down the last table at Café Luna, her movements precise and efficient, despite the exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. At 28, she moved with the quiet grace of someone who'd learned to make every motion count, every moment matter. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her apron bore the faint stains of another 12-hour shift that barely paid enough to keep the lights on. "Mom, I can't find my hearing aids," came the silent gesture from 7-year-old Emma, her small hands dancing through the air with the fluid beauty of sign language. Natalie's face softened as she signed back. "Check your backpack, sweetheart. Remember what we practiced about keeping them safe?" Emma's smile could light up the darkest room. Despite being born with profound hearing loss, she navigated her silent world with a joy that never failed to amaze her mother. The little girl rummaged through her purple backpack, pulling out coloring books and crayons before triumphantly producing the small devices that connected her to the hearing world. "Good job, baby," Natalie signed, stealing a glance at the clock. 7:30 a.m. Mrs. Chen would be here any minute to take Emma to school. And then Natalie would have exactly 15 minutes to grab coffee and a stale pastry before her second job started at the medical supply warehouse. This wasn't the life she'd imagined when she walked across the stage at Georgia Tech 8 years ago, summa cum laude with a degree in mechanical engineering. Back then, the world had seemed full of infinite possibilities. She'd been recruited by 3 major firms, had patents pending on 2 innovative designs, and had been dating Daniel Moore, her colleague at Zenith Engineering, who'd seemed so supportive of her career. That was before everything fell apart. The familiar ache in her chest threatened to surface, but Natalie pushed it down. She'd gotten good at that over the years, compartmentalizing the pain, focusing on what mattered now. Emma mattered. Survival mattered. The past was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Mrs. Chen," Emma's face lit up as the elderly woman entered the cafe, her weathered hands immediately reaching for the child who'd become like a granddaughter to her. "Good morning, my little sunshine," Mrs. Chen said, her English heavily accented but warm. She'd learned basic sign language just for Emma, something that never failed to touch Natalie's heart. Ready for school, as Emma gathered her things. Natalie knelt down to her daughter's level. "Remember what we're saving for," she signed, her expression serious but loving. Emma nodded solemnly, her small hands forming the words, "New ears, so I can hear you sing." The simplicity of it nearly broke Natalie's heart. $85,000 for cochlear implant surgery. It might as well have been $1 million on her current salary, but she'd find a way. She always did. After they left, Natalie began her closing routine, her mind already shifting to the inventory work waiting for her across town. The cafe's espresso machine had been acting up again, a problem she'd diagnosed weeks ago, but couldn't afford to fix properly. Instead, she jury-rigged a temporary solution, using spare parts and some creative engineering that would make her old professors proud. She was elbow-deep in the machine's mechanics when the door chimed. "We're closed," she called out without looking up, her hands working to adjust the pressure valve that had been causing the recent issues. "I can see that," came a deep voice, tinged with exhaustion and something else. Desperation, maybe. "I just need coffee black. I'll pay whatever you want." Natalie glanced up and felt her breath catch. The man standing in her doorway looked like he'd been through hell. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his tie askew, and his dark hair was disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold, steel blue and haunted, carrying the weight of someone fighting a battle he wasn't sure he could win. "We don't have any made," she said, then found herself adding, "But I can make you a cup. Give me 5 minutes." Christopher Hale nodded, slumping into the nearest chair like a man who'd reached the end of his rope. He'd just come from another disastrous meeting with potential investors, another room full of suits who'd looked at his company's quarterly reports and seen nothing but liability. 50 engineers, the best in the country, and not one of them could figure out why his production line was failing. "Machine troubles," he asked, noticing her tools spread across the counter. "Nothing I can't handle," Natalie replied, then surprised herself by explaining, "Pressure differential in the hydraulic circuit. The bypass valve gets stuck when the temperature fluctuates, causes a feedback loop that overheats the heating element. Christopher's head snapped up. He'd heard those exact words, or something very similar, in 3 different engineering meetings this week. You know machines. Natalie's hand stilled on the valve. She'd said too much. I pick things up, she said carefully, focusing on reassembling the espresso machine. Coffee's almost ready, but Christopher was watching her now. Really watching. The way she handled the tools, the confidence in her movements, the casual way she'd diagnosed a problem that had stumped the cafe's repair service for months. Where did you learn to do that? YouTube. She lied smoothly, firing up the machine. The espresso flowed perfectly, rich and aromatic. She poured it into a to-go cup and handed it to him. On the house. You look like you've had a rough day. Christopher took the cup, his fingers brushing hers for just a moment. Something flickered in his expression. Confusion. Recognition. Something he couldn't quite place. Have we met before? Natalie's heart hammered against her ribs. I don't think so. I'd remember you anywhere, Christopher, she thought, fighting to keep her expression neutral. Even if you can't remember me. But Christopher was still studying her face, those blue eyes searching for something he couldn't name. I'm Christopher, he said finally. Natalie. The name felt strange on her tongue, like admitting to a secret she'd kept buried for years. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. That thing you did with the machine. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need at my company. We've got a problem that's stumping everyone, and you just solved something similar in 5 minutes. Natalie's pulse quickened. I'm just a waitress. No, Christopher said quietly, his gaze intense. You're not just anything. After he left, Natalie sank into a chair, her hands shaking slightly. She'd recognized him the moment he walked in, even though he looked older, more worn than the man she'd fallen in love with 8 years ago, the man whose child she'd raised alone, whose memory had been stolen by tragedy and manipulation, the man who'd just walked out of her life twice now, and still had no idea who she really was. Outside, Christopher sat in his car for a long moment, the coffee growing cold in his hands. There was something about the woman in the cafe, something familiar that tugged at the edges of his memory. Like a song he couldn't quite remember but knew by heart, he pulled out his phone and dialed his assistant. Sarah, I need you to find out everything you can about the waitress at Café Luna in Echo Park. Name's Natalie. As he drove away, neither of them realized that fate had just dealt them a second chance, one that would change everything they thought they knew about love, loss, and the price of keeping secrets. 8 years ago, Natalie Rivera had been unstoppable, fresh out of Georgia Tech with a mechanical engineering degree, and a mind that could solve problems others couldn't even see. She'd landed her dream job at Zenith Engineering. Her cubicle had been covered with patents pending, innovation awards, and photos from engineering conferences where she'd presented groundbreaking designs for hydraulic systems. Daniel Moore had seemed like the perfect partner back then, supportive, ambitious, and just as passionate about engineering as she was. They'd worked side by side on projects, stayed late solving complex equations, and planned a future that seemed as solid as the structures they designed. That was before jealousy poisoned everything. Now, sitting in her tiny apartment above a Korean restaurant, Natalie stared at the framed diploma she kept hidden in her bedroom closet. Emma was asleep in the next room, her hearing aids carefully placed in their charging case on the nightstand. The medical bills scattered across Natalie's kitchen table told a story of mounting debt and diminishing hope. $85,000. That's what the cochlear implant surgery would cost, even with insurance. Her portion would be $35,000. Money she'd never see working double shifts at minimum wage jobs. The memory of Daniel's betrayal still burned like acid in her chest. She'd been 6 months pregnant when he'd confronted her in the Zenith parking lot. His face twisted with a rage she'd never seen before. Whose baby is it, Natalie? His voice had been cold, calculating. Because we both know it's not mine. She'd tried to explain about Christopher, about the conference in Austin where they'd met, about the 3 beautiful months they'd shared before his accident stole his memory, but Daniel hadn't wanted explanations. He'd wanted revenge. You think you're so smart, he'd spat. Always getting the promotions, the recognition, the patents. Well, let's see how smart you are when everyone knows you're a fraud. The forged evidence had been masterful. Email trails showing her supposedly stealing designs from colleagues, doctored timestamps on project files, even fake witnesses who claimed they'd seen her accessing restricted databases. Daniel had used his position as senior engineer to plant the evidence systematically, building a case that looked ironclad to HR. "Here's the deal," he'd said during that final devastating meeting. "You disappear from the engineering world completely. No references, no networking, no trying to get another position in the field. In exchange, I don't press charges for intellectual property theft. Pregnant, broke, and legally outgunned." Natalie had signed the non-disclosure agreement that effectively ended her career. She'd watched 8 years of education and dreams dissolve with the stroke of a pen. The sound of her phone buzzing pulled her back to the present. Unknown number. "Hello. Ms. Rivera. This is Sarah Chen from Hale Industries. Mr. Hale would like to schedule a meeting with you regarding a consulting opportunity." Natalie's heart stopped. Christopher's company, after their encounter at the cafe yesterday. She'd spent the night researching Hale Industries online. The headlines were brutal. "Production crisis threatens tech giant. Hale Industries stock plummets amid quality control failures. CEO Christopher Hale fighting to save family empire." "I think there's been a mistake," Natalie said carefully. "I'm not a consultant. Mr. Hale was very specific. He said you demonstrated exceptional mechanical insight, and he'd like to discuss a short-term contract. The compensation would be quite generous." Generous. The word hung in the air like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. "What kind of compensation?" "Mr. Hale authorized me to offer $5 million for successfully resolving our current production issue." The phone slipped from Natalie's hand, clattering to the floor. $5 million. Emma's surgery. Their future. Everything she'd been fighting for. It was right there, offered by the man whose memory had been stolen from her. An hour later, Natalie found herself in the gleaming lobby of Hale Industries, feeling underdressed in her best thrift store blazer. The building screamed success and innovation. Everything she'd once dreamed of being part of. Chrome and glass stretched toward a ceiling that seemed to touch the sky, and the subtle hum of cutting-edge technology filled the air. Christopher appeared from the elevator, and she had to steady herself against the receptionist's desk. He looked different in his natural environment. Powerful, commanding. Every inch the successful CEO. But those blue eyes still carried that haunted quality she'd noticed yesterday. "Natalie, thank you for coming." His smile was professional but warm. "I wasn't sure you would. $5 million is hard to ignore," she said honestly. He led her to a conference room overlooking the city, and she tried not to think about all the times she'd dreamed of working in a place like this. "Before we start, I need to know, do you have any engineering background, because what I saw yesterday wasn't just YouTube learning?" The lie came easily after 8 years of practice. "I took some courses in community college. Nothing formal." Christopher nodded, though something in his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "Here's the situation. Our new production line for electronic components has a failure rate of 37%. Every unit that fails costs us $15,000 in materials and labor, plus potential lawsuits from clients whose systems crash." He pulled up a holographic display showing the production line schematic. Natalie's breath caught. It was beautiful, complex, and she could see the problem immediately, but she forced herself to study it longer, to play the part of someone who needed time to understand. 50 engineers have looked at this, Christopher continued. MIT graduates, Stanford PhDs, people with decades of experience. No one can figure out why it's failing. "What kind of failures?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "Pressure differentials in the hydraulic circuits. Sound familiar?" Their eyes met, and for a moment, Natalie saw a flicker of something. Recognition, maybe, or just the shadow of a memory trying to surface. "I'd need complete access to the production floor," she said. "And I work alone. No supervisors, no observers. If I'm going to solve this, I need to work my way." "Done. But there's one condition." Christopher's expression grew serious. "This stays completely confidential. If word gets out that we're this desperate, it could destroy what's left of our stock value." "I understand. There's something else." He hesitated, then continued. "I have a son, Noah. He's 16, and this company is his inheritance. If I can't fix this, he loses everything. So this isn't just about money for me. It's about family. The irony hit Natalie like a physical blow. Christopher was fighting to save his son's future, while their daughter, his daughter, needed surgery he could easily afford if he only knew she existed. "I'll need to work nights," she said. "I have other obligations during the day. Whatever you need." Christopher stood, extending his hand. "Do we have a deal?" Natalie stared at his outstretched hand, the same hand that had once traced her face in the darkness of hotel rooms, that had held her close while they talked about building a future together. Now he was offering her a chance to reclaim everything she'd lost, and he had no idea he was the father of her child. She shook his hand, trying to ignore the familiar electric current that passed between them. "We have a deal." As she walked out of Hale Industries, Natalie felt the weight of 8 years of secrets pressing down on her shoulders. She was about to enter the world of the man she'd never stopped loving, the man whose child she'd raised alone, the man who didn't remember her at all. But she had no choice. Emma needed that surgery, and this was the only way to get it, even if it meant breaking her heart all over again. The Hale Industries building at 2 a.m. was a different world entirely. Gone were the bustling crowds of engineers and executives, replaced by the soft hum of security systems and the distant whir of machines that never slept. Natalie badged in through the side entrance, her heart pounding as she made her way to the production floor. She'd spent the day researching everything she could about Hale Industries' current crisis, using the cafe's Wi-Fi during her breaks to study technical specifications and production reports. The numbers were devastating. $2.3 million in losses just this month, with the failure rate climbing every week. The production line stretched before her like a sleeping giant, all gleaming steel and precise machinery. In the darkness, lit only by emergency lighting and the glow from various monitors, it looked almost alive. Natalie pulled on a pair of work gloves and approached the central hydraulic system where the failures were most frequent. "Okay, let's see what you're hiding," she whispered, opening the main control panel. The first thing she noticed were the pressure readings. They were all within normal parameters, which should have meant the system was functioning perfectly. But Natalie had learned long ago that machines could lie just as easily as people. She began tracing the hydraulic lines by hand, feeling for vibrations and temperature variations that wouldn't show up on the digital displays. 3 hours later, she found it. Hidden deep within the secondary hydraulic circuit was a component that shouldn't have been there, a pressure release valve that had been installed in the wrong orientation. It was subtle, the kind of mistake that would be nearly impossible to spot unless you knew exactly what to look for. But it was causing microscopic fluctuations in pressure that built up over time, eventually leading to cascade failures throughout the entire system. The thing was, this wasn't a mistake. The valve was precision engineered, installed with surgical precision in exactly the right place to cause maximum damage, while appearing completely normal to casual inspection. This was sabotage. "Son of a bitch," Natalie breathed, her mind racing. Who would want to destroy Hale Industries from the inside? And more importantly, how many other components had been tampered with? She spent the next 4 hours methodically checking every system, documenting everything with photos and detailed notes. By 6 a.m., she'd found 12 more instances of sabotage, all subtle, all designed to cause failures that would look like manufacturing defects or design flaws. The sound of footsteps made her freeze. She quickly closed the control panel and grabbed a clipboard, trying to look like she was conducting a routine inspection. "You're here early," came Christopher's voice from behind her. Natalie turned, her heart skipping at the sight of him. Even at 6 a.m., with his hair slightly mussed and his shirt sleeves rolled up, he was devastatingly handsome. "I'm a night owl," she said. "I think better when it's quiet." Christopher approached the machinery, his expression troubled. "Find anything?" "Maybe. I need more time to be sure, but I think your problem might not be what everyone assumes it is." "What do you mean?" Natalie hesitated, revealing her suspicions about sabotage would open a can of worms that could get dangerous quickly. "Let me run some more tests first. I don't want to say anything until I'm certain." Christopher studied her face in the dim lighting. There was something about her that stirred memories he couldn't quite grasp. The way she moved around the machinery with such confidence, the analytical way she approached problems, even the subtle scent of her perfume that seemed hauntingly familiar. "You remind me of someone," he said quietly. Natalie's breath caught. "Oh, I can't remember who. I had an accident about 8 years ago. Traumatic brain injury. There are chunks of my memory that are just gone. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered so well it made her chest ache. Sometimes I get these flashes, like trying to remember a dream. You trigger something like that. The urge to tell him everything was overwhelming. To say, "It's me, Christopher. It's Natalie. We were in love. We planned a future together. And you have a daughter you've never met, but she couldn't." Too much was at stake. "Maybe I just have one of those faces," she said instead. Maybe. But he was still watching her with those intense blue eyes that seemed to see straight through her careful facade. The awkward moment was broken by the sound of more footsteps. A security guard appeared, looking surprised to see them both there. "Morning, Mr. Hale. Didn't expect to see you this early." "Couldn't sleep," Christopher replied. "Marcus, this is Natalie. She's consulting on our production issues. Make sure she has access to whatever she needs, any time of day or night." "Will do, sir," after the guard left. Christopher turned back to her. "I should let you work, but Natalie," she looked up at him, trying to keep her expression neutral. "Whatever you're looking for, I hope you find it, this company. It's not just my livelihood, it's my son's future." The mention of Noah made Natalie's chest tighten. "Tell me about him." Christopher's entire demeanor changed, his face lighting up with paternal pride. "He's incredible. 16, brilliant, wants to be an engineer like his old man. He's got this condition, partial hearing loss, but it doesn't slow him down at all. Actually makes him more determined. I think," Natalie's hands clenched involuntarily, "Noah had hearing problems too, just like Emma, just like her. He sounds amazing," she managed. "He is. And right now, he's watching his father's company fall apart and trying to pretend it doesn't scare him. That's why this matters so much." Christopher's voice grew fierce. "I won't let him lose everything because I couldn't solve a problem." After he left, Natalie sank onto a nearby stool, overwhelmed by the complexity of her situation. She was falling for Christopher all over again, even though he didn't remember her. She was solving the crisis that threatened his son's inheritance, while her own daughter, his daughter, needed surgery they couldn't afford. And now she'd discovered that someone was actively trying to destroy his company from within. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen, Emma asking when you'll be home. "She drew you a picture." Natalie smiled despite everything. Emma's drawings were always elaborate stories told in crayon and marker, usually featuring herself and her mom as superheroes saving the world. The little girl had no idea that her mother was currently trying to save a different kind of world, one that belonged to the father she'd never met. The next few hours passed in a blur of technical analysis and careful documentation. Natalie worked with the focused intensity that had made her stand out at Georgia Tech, the same drive that had earned her 3 patents before Daniel destroyed her career. She was good at this. Better than good. She was brilliant, and it felt amazing to use her brain for something more challenging than remembering coffee orders. By noon, she had a complete picture of the sabotage operation. 12 compromised components, all installed by someone with intimate knowledge of the system's vulnerabilities, someone who had access to the production floor and the technical expertise to make their sabotage look like random failures. The question was, who? And more importantly, what would they do when they realized someone was getting close to the truth? As Natalie gathered her notes and prepared to leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The production floor felt different somehow, charged with tension that hadn't been there the night before. She was walking toward the exit when she heard it, the soft click of a camera shutter from somewhere in the shadows. Someone was documenting her presence here. Someone knew exactly who she was and what she was doing. The game, it seemed, was about to change completely. 8 years ago, the Austin Convention Center buzzed with the energy of the International Engineering Symposium, filled with the brightest minds in mechanical and industrial engineering. Natalie Rivera, fresh-faced and 20, walked through the exhibit halls with the confidence of someone who knew she belonged among these innovators. Her presentation on hydraulic pressure optimization had earned standing ovations that morning, and 3 companies had already approached her about potential job offers. She was studying a particularly interesting display on renewable energy systems when she heard a voice behind her. "The efficiency ratios on their wind turbine design are impressive, but they're missing a crucial element in the gear reduction system." Natalie turned to find herself face to face with one of the most striking men she'd ever seen. Tall, with dark hair and those incredible blue eyes, He wore his expensive suit like it was a second skin, but it was the intelligence in his gaze that caught her attention. Here was someone who understood engineering the way she did, who saw the poetry in precision mechanics. "You're right," she said, surprising him. "They need a variable pressure dampening system to compensate for wind fluctuations. Without it, they'll have gear stress failures within 18 months. His smile was devastating. "Christopher Hale," he said, extending his hand. "Natalie Rivera, and I know who you are." She shook his hand, trying to ignore the electric current that seemed to pass between them. "I've read your papers on industrial automation. Brilliant work. Thank you. I attended your presentation this morning. Hydraulic pressure optimization in closed-loop systems. You're revolutionizing an entire field of study." They spent the next 4 hours walking through the convention together, debating engineering principles, sharing ideas, and discovering a connection that went far beyond professional admiration. Christopher was brilliant, passionate about innovation, and unlike any man she'd ever met, he listened to her ideas with genuine interest, challenged her thinking without condescension, and made her laugh until her sides ached. "Are you married?" she asked during dinner at a quiet restaurant off the beaten path. Christopher's expression grew complicated. "Technically, yes, but it's complicated. Julia and I married young, right out of college. We grew apart over the years. She wants the corporate wife lifestyle. The social climbing, the appearances. I want to build things, create innovations that matter. We've been living separate lives for years. That sounds lonely. It was, until today." His gaze met hers across the candlelit table. "I know this is crazy. We just met. But I feel like I've been waiting my whole life for someone who understands what drives me." Natalie felt her heart skip. "I know exactly what you mean." What followed were 3 months of the most intense, passionate relationship of Natalie's life. Christopher would fly to Los Angeles every weekend, and she'd meet him in various cities when their conference schedules aligned. They talked for hours about everything. Engineering. Dreams. The future they wanted to build together. He was filing for divorce from Julia, and Natalie had been offered a position at Zenith Engineering that would keep her in California while he established a West Coast division of his company. Their last weekend together had been perfect. Christopher had rented a beach house in Malibu, and they'd spent 2 days planning their future with the naive confidence of people deeply in love. "I want to build something with you," he'd said, holding her close as they watched the sunset. "Not just a relationship. I want us to be partners in everything. Business, life, family." "Family," Natalie had teased. "Getting ahead of yourself, aren't you?" "Maybe, but I can see it. You, me, kids who inherit your brilliant mind and hopefully my. What do I have that's worth inheriting?" "Your heart," she'd said simply. "Your integrity, your passion for making the world better." He'd kissed her then, and she'd never felt more certain about anything in her life. 2 days later, everything changed. Christopher had been driving back from a meeting in San Francisco when a drunk driver ran a red light, slamming into his car at 60 miles per hour. The impact had been devastating. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and most cruelly, a traumatic brain injury that stole chunks of his recent memory. Natalie had rushed to the hospital, but Julia was already there, playing the devoted wife for the cameras and medical staff. "He doesn't remember you," Julia had told her coldly in the hospital corridor. "The doctors say his memory loss affects the last 6 months. As far as Christopher knows, you don't exist." "But he'll recover," Natalie had protested. "When he gets better, he'll remember." "Will he?" Julia's smile had been vicious. "Brain injuries are unpredictable. The doctors say he might never recover those memories, and I'm going to make sure he doesn't." True to her word, Julia had orchestrated Christopher's recovery with surgical precision. She'd removed all traces of Natalie from his apartment, deleted her contact information from his phone, and briefed his assistant to never mention any conferences or meetings where they might have met. When Christopher asked about gaps in his memory, Julia filled them with carefully crafted lies about romantic dinners and business trips they'd supposedly taken together. Natalie had tried to reach him once, calling his office 3 weeks after the accident. "I'm sorry," his assistant had said. "Mr. Hale doesn't have any meetings scheduled with engineers from Zenith. Perhaps you could submit a formal proposal through our business development department." The professional coldness in the woman's voice had made it clear that Christopher truly didn't remember her at all. Heartbroken and pregnant with his child, Natalie had made the hardest decision of her life. She disappeared from his world completely, unable to bear the thought of having to explain their relationship to a man who looked at her like a stranger. Present day. The memory hit Natalie like a physical blow as she sat in her car outside Hale Industries. Still shaking from the realization that someone had been photographing her, she'd spent 8 years trying to forget the intensity of those 3 months with Christopher, the way he'd made her feel like she could conquer the world as long as they were together. Now she was back in his orbit, and despite everything that had happened, despite the pain and the years of struggle, she could feel herself falling for him all over again. The way he talked about Noah with such fierce love, the dedication he showed to saving his company, the glimpses of the man she'd fallen in love with. It was all still there, just buried under 8 years of different experiences. Her phone rang, jolting her back to the present. Mrs. Chen's number. "Natalie, you need to come home. Emma's not feeling well." Panic shot through her. "What's wrong?" "She says her ears hurt and she's running a fever. I think it might be an infection." Natalie's heart sank. Ear infections were common in children with Emma's level of hearing loss, but they required immediate medical attention and antibiotics that cost money she didn't have. "I'll be right there." As she drove home through the morning traffic, Natalie's mind raced between worry for Emma and the growing complexity of her situation with Christopher. She was solving his company's crisis while falling in love with him again, all while keeping the secret that their daughter needed surgery they couldn't afford. The irony was devastating. Christopher was fighting to save his son's inheritance, while his daughter, the child he didn't know existed, was suffering just miles away. But what choice did she have? Tell him the truth and risk losing the only chance she had to get Emma the help she needed? Or continue living this elaborate lie, hoping she could solve his problems and disappear before her heart broke completely? As she pulled into her neighborhood, Natalie caught sight of a black sedan that had been following her since she left Hale Industries. The same car that had been parked across from the cafe yesterday. Someone was definitely watching her. Someone who knew exactly who she was and what she meant to Christopher Hale. The game was becoming more dangerous by the hour, and Emma was caught in the middle of it all. The urgent care clinic's waiting room smelled of disinfectant and desperation. Natalie held Emma close, feeling her daughter's fevered forehead against her shoulder while they waited to be called. The little girl had been unusually quiet all morning, communicating only through the most basic signs, her usual vibrant energy dampened by pain and exhaustion. Emma Rivera, a nurse, appeared at the door, clipboard in hand. The examination was routine but expensive. $200 for the visit, another $45 for antibiotics. Natalie handed over her credit card, praying it wouldn't be declined. The balance was already dangerously close to the limit, but Emma's health came first. Always. "The infection isn't serious, doctor," Martinez assured her in accented English. "But with her hearing loss, we need to monitor these carefully. Any delays in treatment could cause additional damage." Natalie nodded, signing the discharge papers while Emma dozed fitfully in her arms. "How often should I bring her in for checkups?" "Every 3 months. Ideally." And Natalie, the doctor's expression grew gentle. "I know the surgery costs are overwhelming, but Emma's a perfect candidate for cochlear implants. The sooner we can do it, the better her outcomes will be." The weight of those words settled on Natalie's shoulders like a lead blanket. Every month they delayed was a month of language development Emma would never get back. A month of hearing the world around her that was lost forever. They were walking to the car when Natalie's phone buzzed. Unknown number again. Natalie Rivera. The voice was smooth, familiar, and made her blood run cold. "Who is this?" "Someone who's been watching your recent career moves with great interest. We need to talk." Before she could respond, a man stepped out from behind a parked car. Daniel Moore looked exactly the same as he had 8 years ago. Medium height, thinning brown hair, and those calculating eyes that had once fooled her into thinking he cared about her success. Emma stirred in her arms, sensing her tension. "Hello, Natalie. You look..." He paused, his gaze moving to Emma with predatory interest. "Tired? Motherhood must be exhausting. What do you want, Daniel?" Natalie's voice was steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "To catch up, of course. It's been what, 8 years? You've certainly made some interesting choices." His smile was poison wrapped in silk. "Working as a waitress when you could be revolutionizing industrial engineering, such a waste of talent." "I'm doing fine. Are you?" Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're struggling to pay for basic medical care for your daughter." Daniel's eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. "Emma, isn't it? Such a pretty little girl. She has the most interesting eyes. Very distinctive blue color." Natalie's grip on Emma tightened. Don't what? Notice the obvious. Because those eyes are remarkably similar to someone we both know." Daniel stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I've been doing some research, Natalie. Medical records are fascinating things when you know where to look." The world seemed to tilt around her. "You're lying." "Am I? Let's see. Emma Rivera. Born February 15th, 7 years ago. Father listed as unknown on the birth certificate. But DNA doesn't lie. Does it? Especially when you cross-reference blood type information from newborn screening with certain medical records from a car accident victim 8 years ago?" Natalie felt like she might vomit. "How did you—" "I have connections everywhere, sweetheart. The question is, what are we going to do with this information?" Emma was fully awake now, watching the conversation with the keen intelligence of a child who'd learned to read body language when words failed her. She signed to her mother. "Bad man. No, baby." Natalie signed back, forcing a smile. "Just someone Mama used to work with." Daniel watched the exchange with fascination. Sign language. How resourceful. I imagine Christopher would be very interested to learn he has a daughter, especially one with special needs who requires expensive medical procedures. "What do you want?" Natalie's voice was barely above a whisper. "Simple. Stop whatever you're doing at Hale Industries and walk away. Disappear, just like you did 8 years ago." "I can't do that." "Can't." Daniel laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Oh, I think you can, because the alternative is much worse for everyone involved." He pulled out his phone, showing her a series of photographs, pictures of her entering Hale Industries at night, working on the production line, talking with Christopher in the conference room. "I know you've discovered the production problems aren't accidental," Daniel continued. "Very impressive detective work, by the way. But here's what you don't know. I'm the one who caused them." Natalie stared at him in shock. "You? But why?" "Because Christopher Hale took something from me 8 years ago, and now I'm taking everything from him." Daniel's mask of civility slipped, revealing the bitter rage underneath. "You were supposed to be mine, Natalie. We worked together, planned together, and then you disappeared for 3 months and came back pregnant with another man's child." "Daniel, you're insane." "Am I? Or am I just finally getting the justice I deserve?" He stepped closer, and Natalie instinctively backed away. "I've spent 8 years planning this, getting hired as an external consultant at Zenith, gaining access to industrial sabotage techniques, placing my people inside Hale Industries. Christopher's company is going to fall, and when it does, Zenith will acquire the pieces for pennies on the dollar. The scope of his revenge was breathtaking in its cruelty. You destroyed my career just to get back at him. I destroyed your career because you betrayed me. The fact that it also positioned me to destroy him was just serendipity." Daniel's smile returned, cold and calculating. "But now you're threatening to undo years of careful work. So here's what's going to happen." He leaned in close enough that Emma could see his face clearly. The little girl's eyes widened with instinctive fear. "You're going to stop your investigation immediately. You're going to tell Christopher that the problem is unsolvable, and you're going to disappear from his life again, permanently. And if I don't, then I release everything. Photos of you working there, documentation of your past relationship, proof that Emma is his daughter, and most importantly, evidence that you've been lying to him about your identity from the moment you walked back into his life." Daniel's voice grew deadly quiet. "How do you think Christopher will react when he learns that the woman he's been falling for again is the same woman who disappeared without a word when he needed her most?" Natalie felt tears burning behind her eyes. "He didn't remember me. You know that. Does it matter? You still abandoned him, and now you're using his desperation to solve his company's problems while keeping his own daughter a secret from him? What kind of mother does that make you?" The words hit like physical blows. Every fear she'd harbored about her choices, every guilty thought about keeping Emma's parentage secret, Daniel was weaponizing them all against her. "You have 24 hours to make your decision," Daniel said, straightening his jacket like they'd just concluded a business meeting. "Either you disappear, or I destroy everyone you claim to care about." He walked away. leaving Natalie standing in the parking lot with Emma in her arms, her world crumbling around her for the second time in 8 years. Emma looked up at her mother's face and signed, "Mama, sad." "Yes, baby," Natalie signed back, her hands trembling. "Mama's very sad." But sad didn't begin to cover it. She was trapped between protecting Emma's future and preserving Christopher's. Between the love she'd never stopped feeling and the secret that could destroy them all. 24 hours to choose between everything she'd ever wanted and everything she'd ever lost. The cruel irony was that no matter what she chose, she'd lose them both anyway. Natalie barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's cold smile and heard his ultimatum echoing in her head. 24 hours. She lay in bed listening to Emma's soft breathing from the next room, the antibiotics finally helping her daughter rest peacefully. By 4 a.m., she'd made her decision. She couldn't walk away, not when she was so close to solving the sabotage that threatened Christopher's company, and not when the $5 million could change Emma's life forever. But she also couldn't ignore Daniel's threats. She would have to be smarter than him. At dawn, Natalie was back at Hale Industries, her security badge granting her access to the production floor. She had roughly 18 hours before Daniel expected her answer, and she intended to use every minute gathering evidence that would expose his sabotage operation. The production line hummed with early morning activity as the first shift arrived. Natalie moved carefully among the workers, her casual clothes and clipboard making her look like just another quality control inspector. But her trained eye was cataloging every detail, every potential point of sabotage. "Excuse me, miss." One of the line supervisors approached her. "You're the consultant, mister," Hale mentioned. "That's right. Just doing some final assessments. Well, if you can figure out what's wrong with this equipment, you'll be a hero around here. We lost another $50,000 in defective units yesterday." Natalie nodded sympathetically while her mind raced. $50,000 in a single day? Daniel's sabotage was accelerating, probably because he knew she was getting close to the truth. She spent the morning systematically photographing every compromised component she'd identified, building a comprehensive case file. The evidence was damning. No random equipment failure could be this precisely orchestrated. But she needed more than just proof of sabotage. She needed proof that Daniel was behind it. Around noon, her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. "Emma feeling much better. Wants to know when you're coming home." The simple message made Natalie's chest tighten. Whatever happened with Daniel, she had to make sure Emma stayed safe. Her daughter's innocent world couldn't be shattered by the ugly realities of adult revenge and corporate espionage. Finding anything interesting, Natalie spun around to find Christopher approaching, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. Even exhausted and stressed, he still took her breath away. "Maybe," she said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Your problems are definitely more complex than they appear on the surface." "I was hoping you'd say that." Christopher's smile was tired but genuine. "Because I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about your background. I did some checking." Natalie's blood ran cold. "What kind of checking?" "Community college records. The engineering courses you mentioned. They don't exist at any of the local schools." Christopher's blue eyes studied her face intently. "So either you're lying about your education, or you're lying about something else." The moment stretched between them. Loaded with 8 years of secrets and half-truths, Natalie felt the weight of Daniel's threats pressing down on her. But she also saw something else in Christopher's expression. Not anger, but hope. Like he was praying she'd tell him the truth. "It's complicated," she said finally. "Try me. I'm pretty good with complicated." Before Natalie could respond, a commotion erupted from the production line. Alarms were blaring, and workers were backing away from one of the main hydraulic systems. "Pressure spike in Sector 7, someone shouted. Christopher was moving before the words fully registered, his CEO persona falling away to reveal the hands-on engineer underneath. Natalie followed, her own instincts kicking in as she assessed the situation. The hydraulic system was hemorrhaging fluid from a burst pressure line, creating a dangerous slick on the factory floor. Workers scrambled to shut down the affected section while supervisors barked orders through radio headsets. "How bad is it?" Christopher demanded of the floor manager. "Bad. That's our main production line. And the pressure spike damaged 3 other systems. We're looking at a complete shutdown for at least a week." Natalie moved closer to the damaged equipment, her trained eye immediately spotting the problem. The pressure line that had burst wasn't one of the components she'd identified as sabotaged. This was something new. This wasn't random, she said quietly to Christopher. Someone accelerated the timeline. What do you mean? The sabotage I've been tracking. It's designed to cause gradual failures over time. This was triggered deliberately to create maximum damage right now. Christopher's face went pale. You're saying someone is actively attacking my company. I'm saying someone wants you to fail, and they're running out of patience. The implications hit them both simultaneously. If the saboteur was escalating their attacks, it meant Natalie's investigation had spooked them, and if they were willing to cause this kind of obvious damage, they were probably desperate enough to do worse. Mr. Hale, one of the workers approached hesitantly. There's someone here to see you, says it's urgent. Christopher looked torn between dealing with the production crisis and handling whatever new emergency had arrived. Who is it? Your son, sir. He's in your office. The mention of Noah made Christopher's expression shift to immediate concern. Watch the cleanup, he told the floor manager. I'll be back in 10 minutes. He started toward the elevator, then paused. Natalie, come with me. I want Noah to meet you. Natalie's heart hammered against her ribs. Meeting Christopher's son, Emma's half-brother, felt like crossing a line she couldn't uncross, but she couldn't refuse without raising more suspicions. Christopher's office was a study in controlled chaos. Engineering blueprints covered one wall. Financial reports were scattered across his desk. And a framed photo of a teenage boy with Christopher's blue eyes sat prominently near his computer. The boy in the photo was standing by the window when they entered, and Natalie's breath caught. Noah Hale was tall for 16, with dark hair and those distinctive blue eyes that marked him unmistakably as Christopher's son. But it was the hearing aids barely visible in his ears that made her chest tighten with recognition. Dad, we need to talk, Noah said, his voice carrying the precise diction of someone who'd learned to speak, despite hearing challenges. It's about the custody hearing. Noah, this is Natalie. She's helping us with the production issues. Noah turned toward her, and Natalie saw intelligence in his gaze that reminded her painfully of Emma. Nice to meet you. Are you the one who's going to save Dad's company? I'm trying, Natalie said, surprised by how natural it felt to talk to him. Good, because Mom's lawyer is saying the company's bankruptcy proves Dad can't provide a stable home environment. Noah's jaw set with determination that was pure Christopher. But I know Dad will figure it out. He always does. The faith in the boy's voice was heartbreaking. Here was Christopher's son, fighting to stay with his father, while Emma, their daughter, needed surgery. Christopher could easily afford if he only knew she existed. The hearing's tomorrow, Christopher said quietly. If we can't show that the company is stable, he didn't need to finish. Noah would go to live with his mother, and Christopher would lose both his son and his business. Mr. Hale, his assistant's voice came through the intercom. There's a Daniel Moore here to see you. He says he's from Zenith Engineering. Natalie felt the blood drain from her face. Daniel was here, at Hale Industries, ready to make good on his threats if she didn't give him the answer he wanted. Should I send him up? The assistant continued. Christopher looked at Natalie, noting her sudden pallor. Do you know him? The moment of truth had arrived. Natalie could lie again, protect her secrets a little longer, and hope she could somehow outmaneuver Daniel. Or she could tell Christopher the truth, and trust that the man she'd fallen in love with 8 years ago was still in there somewhere. Yes, she said quietly. I know him, and Christopher. There's something I need to tell you about why I'm really here. Send him up, Christopher told his assistant, his eyes never leaving Natalie's pale face. But give us 5 minutes first. Noah sensed the tension immediately. Dad, what's going on? Son, I need you to wait in the conference room for a few minutes. Natalie and I need to discuss something privately. But please, Noah, this is important. After Noah reluctantly left, Christopher turned to face Natalie fully. The concern in his blue eyes was almost her undoing. Talk to me, he said quietly. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. Natalie's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone, scrolling to a photo she'd never shown anyone. It was from Emma's 6th birthday party, her daughter blowing out candles on a homemade cake, her face radiant with joy despite the silence that surrounded her. Her name is Emma, Natalie said, holding out the phone. She's 7 years old and she's brilliant and brave and beautiful. And Christopher, she's your daughter." The phone slipped from Christopher's fingers, clattering to the floor. He stared at the image, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and something that might have been wonder. "That's impossible," he whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. "Austin, 8 years ago, the International Engineering Symposium." Natalie's voice was steady, despite the tears threatening to fall. "We met at the renewable energy exhibit. You said the wind turbine design was missing a variable pressure dampening system." Christopher's hand went to his temple, the gesture achingly familiar. There are pieces missing from that time, the accident. You were going to leave Julia. We planned everything. Your West Coast division. My job at Zenith. The future we wanted to build together." The words poured out of her like a dam bursting. "But then the accident happened and you didn't remember me. Julia made sure of that." "The beach house," Christopher said suddenly, his voice distant. "Malibu. I keep having dreams about a beach house and a woman with dark hair who..." He looked at her with dawning recognition. "You. Me. But why didn't you tell me? When you came back? Why didn't you?" "Because you looked at me like a stranger, Christopher. Because I was pregnant and scared and 20 years old. And I couldn't bear to explain our entire relationship to someone who had no memory of loving me." Christopher sank into his chair, overwhelmed. "Emma, my daughter, she has my eyes. And your brilliant mind, and Noah's hearing challenges." Natalie's voice broke slightly. "She needs surgery, Christopher. Cochlear implants that cost more money than I'll ever have working as a waitress." The full weight of her sacrifice hit him like a physical blow. "The $5 million, you're not just consulting. You're trying to save your daughter. Our daughter." Before Christopher could respond, his assistant's voice came through the intercom again. "Mr. Hale, Mr. Moore is getting impatient." Christopher stood slowly, his movements careful like a man navigating through an earthquake. "We're not done with this conversation. I know, but Christopher, you need to understand. Daniel is dangerous. He's the one sabotaging your company." "What?" "He's been planning this for 8 years. He destroyed my career because he was jealous of our relationship, and now he's destroying your company to get revenge on both of us." The office door opened before Christopher could respond, and Daniel Moore walked in without waiting for permission. He looked exactly as polished and calculating as he had in the parking lot, but now Natalie could see the barely contained rage simmering beneath his professional facade. "Christopher Hale," Daniel said, extending his hand. "It's an honor to finally meet in person. I'm Daniel Moore, senior consultant with Zenith Engineering." Christopher shook his hand warily. "Mr. Moore, what brings you here?" "Concern for a fellow engineer, actually. I've been hearing disturbing reports about your production difficulties." Daniel's gaze flicked to Natalie with poisonous satisfaction. "I thought perhaps Zenith could offer some assistance." "That's generous, but we're handling it internally." "Are you?" "Because from what I understand, you've resorted to hiring unqualified consultants." Daniel's smile was razor sharp. "Waitresses with no formal engineering background, if the rumors are true." Natalie felt Christopher tense beside her. "Ms. Rivera is highly qualified." "Is she?" "Because I happen to know Ms. Rivera quite well. We used to work together at Zenith, before she was terminated for intellectual property theft." "That's a lie," Natalie said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Is it? I have documentation." "Christopher, emails, witness statements, evidence that your consultant stole proprietary designs and tried to pass them off as her own work." Daniel pulled out a tablet, swiping to display official-looking documents. "She was fired in disgrace 8 years ago and blacklisted from the engineering industry." Christopher looked between them, his expression unreadable. "These are serious accusations. They're fabrications," Natalie said firmly. "Daniel forged that evidence because he was jealous of my success and my relationship with..." "Relationship?" Daniel's laugh was cruel. "What relationship? You mean that pathetic fantasy you constructed about some conference romance?" "Christopher, she's delusional. She's been stalking you for years." "That's enough," Christopher said, his voice dangerous. But Daniel was just getting started. "Did she tell you about her daughter, the child she's been hiding from you? Because I have to wonder, what kind of mother uses her disabled daughter as an excuse to infiltrate a company and seduce the CEO?" Natalie felt the world tilting around her. "Daniel, stop." "Stop what?" Telling the truth. You're pathetic, Natalie. 8 years ago and now, always chasing after men who don't want you. The crack of Christopher's fist connecting with Daniel's jaw echoed through the office like a gunshot. Daniel staggered backward, blood trickling from his split lip. "Get out," Christopher said, his voice deadly quiet. "Get out of my building before I have security throw you out." Daniel wiped the blood from his mouth, his composure finally cracking. "You have no idea what you've just done, Hale. You think she's going to save your company? She's the reason it's failing. What are you talking about? Ask her about the sabotage she supposedly uncovered. Ask her how convenient it is that she's the only one who can solve problems that started appearing right around the time she showed up." Christopher's gaze flicked to Natalie, doubt creeping into his expression for the first time. "He's lying," Natalie said desperately. "Christopher, you have to believe me." "Do I?" "Because right now, I don't know what to believe about anything." Daniel smiled, sensing victory. "Check the security footage, Christopher. Look at the timestamps on the production failures. Compare them to her access logs. You'll find some very interesting correlations." He straightened his jacket, his professional mask sliding back into place. "When you're ready to hear the truth about who's really destroying your company, call me. Zenith's offer to acquire your asset still stands." After Daniel left, the office fell into crushing silence. Christopher stood by the window, his shoulders rigid with tension. "Is any of it true?" he asked without turning around. "The sabotage is real. But Christopher, I didn't cause it. I discovered it. Every component I've found, every failure I've documented, it all points to a systematic campaign to destroy your company from the inside. Convenient timing, though. Like he said, yes, it is convenient, because Daniel knew I'd figure it out eventually. He's been waiting 8 years for this moment, to destroy both of us at the same time." Christopher finally turned to face her, and the pain in his eyes nearly broke her heart. "How do I know you're telling the truth? About any of it? The sabotage? Our past? Emma?" "Because," Natalie said simply, "I have proof of everything, including evidence that will send Daniel to prison for industrial espionage." She pulled out her phone, showing him the photographs she'd been collecting. "But more than that, Christopher, I need you to remember, not the facts or the timeline. Remember how you felt when you looked at me yesterday. Remember the connection you said you couldn't explain." "I remember," he whispered. "Then trust that feeling. Trust me, because tomorrow, I'm going to expose Daniel Moore for what he really is. And I'm going to save your company. And then what?" Natalie's voice was barely audible. "And then I'll disappear again, if that's what you want. But Emma will have her surgery, and you'll know you have a daughter who loves you even though she's never met you." The weight of 8 years of secrets, lies and lost love hung between them like a chasm. Neither knew how to cross. The boardroom at Hale Industries buzzed with nervous energy as the emergency meeting convened. Christopher sat at the head of the massive mahogany table, his expression unreadable as board members, investors, and department heads filed in. The recent production disasters had spooked everyone, and whispers of bankruptcy filled the air like poison. Natalie stood near the projection screen, her laptop connected and ready. She'd spent the entire night organizing her evidence, cross-referencing production failures with security logs, and building an ironclad case that would expose Daniel's sabotage operation. Her hands were steady, but her heart hammered against her ribs. Everything depended on the next hour. "Ladies and gentlemen," Christopher began, his voice commanding the room's attention. "We're here because Hale Industries is facing the greatest crisis in our company's history. Our production failures have cost us millions, and our reputation is hanging by a thread." Board member Harrison Wells, a silver-haired man who'd been questioning Christopher's leadership for months, leaned forward aggressively. "Which is why we need to seriously consider Zenith Engineering's acquisition offer. At least our shareholders would salvage something from this disaster." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Natalie could see the vultures circling, ready to pick apart everything Christopher had built. "Before we make any decisions," Christopher continued, "I want you to hear from our consulting engineer, Natalie Rivera. She's uncovered some disturbing information about our production issues." "A waitress," Wells scoffed. "Christopher, with all due respect, we need real engineers, not..." "She is a real engineer." Christopher's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Georgia Tech, summa cum laude, with patents in hydraulic system design. And she's about to save this company. Natalie stepped forward, feeling the weight of 20 pairs of skeptical eyes. The production failures you've been experiencing aren't random mechanical problems or design flaws. They're the result of systematic sabotage. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Wells looked openly incredulous. That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof? Comprehensive proof. Natalie clicked to her first slide, showing detailed schematics of the compromised systems. Over the past 6 months, 12 critical components have been deliberately modified to cause cascade failures. Each modification was precisely engineered to appear like normal wear or manufacturing defects. She clicked through image after image. Pressure valves installed backward, hydraulic seals with microscopic punctures, circuit boards with nearly invisible modifications. The evidence was overwhelming. This level of sabotage requires intimate knowledge of our systems, said Rebecca Martinez, the head of security. It would have to be someone with high-level access. Exactly. Someone who could walk through our facility without raising suspicion, who understood our vulnerabilities, and who had help from the inside. Christopher leaned forward. Do you know who's responsible? Yes. Daniel Moore, senior consultant with Zenith Engineering, has been orchestrating this operation for 8 years. The room fell silent. Wells's face had gone pale. That's impossible. Daniel Moore is a respected engineer. His recommendations for our security protocols were designed to create the very vulnerabilities he's been exploiting. Natalie pulled up a series of documents. These are Moore's consulting reports from 2 years ago, when Zenith first approached Hale Industries about a partnership. Notice how his security recommendations actually created access points for sabotage. She clicked to the next slide, showing security footage timestamps. Here's the correlation between his visits to our facility and subsequent production failures. The pattern is undeniable. Board member Jennifer Kim raised her hand. But why would Zenith want to sabotage us? What's their end game? Acquisition at fire sale prices, drive down our value through systematic failures, then swoop in with a rescue offer when we're desperate. Natalie's voice grew stronger as she laid out the conspiracy. But this isn't just corporate espionage, it's personal revenge. She pulled up a new set of documents: emails, personnel records, financial transactions. 8 years ago, Daniel Moore and I worked together at Zenith. When I was terminated under false pretenses, he used his position to ensure I was blacklisted from the engineering industry. Why? Christopher asked, though something in his expression suggested he already knew. Because he discovered I was in a relationship with someone he considered a professional rival, someone he blamed for my success and his own mediocrity. Natalie's gaze met Christopher's across the room. He's been planning this revenge ever since. Wells stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're asking us to believe that our production crisis is the result of some elaborate personal vendetta. It's absurd. Is it? Natalie clicked to her final slide. A recorded phone conversation. This is Daniel Moore, recorded yesterday, confessing to the sabotage operation. She'd hidden a recording app on her phone during their confrontation in the parking lot. Daniel's voice filled the boardroom, cold and calculating. I've spent 8 years planning this. Christopher's company is going to fall, and when it does, Zenith will acquire the pieces for pennies on the dollar. The room erupted in chaos. Board members shouted questions. Investors demanded explanations. And Security Chief Martinez was already on her phone calling law enforcement. But Natalie wasn't finished. There's more, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. The sabotage operation involves at least 3 Hale Industries employees who were planted by Zenith over the past 2 years. I have their names, their access codes, and documentation of their activities. She displayed personnel files showing inconsistencies in background checks, financial records revealing suspicious payments, and security footage of the infiltrators accessing restricted areas. This is corporate espionage on a massive scale, Martinez said, still on her phone. We're talking about federal charges. Wells had sunk back into his chair, his face ashen. If this is true, the liability alone could destroy Zenith. It is true, Natalie said firmly. And I have one more piece of evidence that proves Daniel Moore's personal motivation for this attack. She hesitated, knowing that her next words would change everything forever. Christopher gave her an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. 8 years ago, I was pregnant when I left Zenith. Daniel Moore discovered that the father of my child was Christopher Hale, and he's been planning revenge against both of us ever since. The silence in the room was deafening. Board members stared between Natalie and Christopher, the implications slowly sinking in. Christopher stood, his voice steady despite the emotional earthquake shaking his world. Natalie Rivera is the mother of my daughter, Emma, a daughter I only learned about yesterday because of Daniel Moore's manipulation and lies. Wells looked like he might faint. Christopher, do you understand what you're saying? The legal ramifications alone? I understand that this company was built on innovation, integrity, and family values, Christopher said firmly. And I understand that Daniel Moore tried to destroy all three because of his own jealousy and inadequacy. The conference room door burst open, and Daniel Moore strode in flanked by two men in expensive suits. Lawyers, by the look of them. Sorry I'm late, Daniel said, his confidence unshaken despite the evidence mounted against him. I heard there was some kind of emergency meeting. I thought Zenith should be represented considering our acquisition offer. The room fell silent again. Daniel's gaze swept over the evidence displayed on screen, and for just a moment, his composure cracked. Interesting presentation, he said, recovering quickly, though I have to question the credibility of accusations coming from a disgraced engineer with obvious mental health issues. Mental health issues? Christopher's voice was deadly quiet. Surely you've noticed her obsessive behavior, the way she's constructed elaborate fantasies about your relationship. She's been stalking you for years, Christopher. This whole consulting arrangement is just her latest delusion. Natalie felt the familiar knife twist of his psychological manipulation. But this time, she wasn't alone and powerless. The only delusion here, she said calmly, is your belief that you could get away with 8 years of fraud, sabotage, and industrial espionage. Martinez stepped forward, her security badge visible. Daniel Moore, you're under citizen's arrest for corporate sabotage, industrial espionage, and conspiracy to defraud. FBI agents are en route. Daniel's lawyers immediately began talking about rights and representation, but Daniel himself was staring at Natalie with pure hatred. You have no idea what you've done, he snarled. You think exposing me will give you your fairy tale ending. You're still the same pathetic woman who got fired for stealing ideas. No, Christopher said, moving to stand beside Natalie. She's the brilliant engineer who just saved my company and exposed your criminal conspiracy. And, added a new voice from the doorway, she's the woman who's going to help me send you to prison. Everyone turned to see Noah Hale standing in the entrance. His phone held up, obviously recording. Behind him stood a little girl with dark hair and the most beautiful blue eyes anyone in that room had ever seen. Emma had come to meet her father. The boardroom fell into stunned silence as Emma stepped forward, her small hand tucked securely in Noah's. She looked impossibly tiny in the vast corporate space, but her blue eyes, Christopher's eyes, surveyed the room with the quiet confidence of a child who'd learned to navigate an adult world that often forgot she existed. Emma, what are you doing here? Natalie signed frantically, her maternal instincts overriding everything else. You're supposed to be at school, Mrs. Chen brought me, Emma signed back, her movements graceful and sure. She said it was important for me to meet my daddy. Christopher's breath caught audibly, seeing Emma in person, watching her communicate in the fluid poetry of sign language, hit him with an emotional force that nearly buckled his knees. This was his daughter, their daughter, and she was absolutely beautiful. Daniel's lawyers were still talking rapidly about rights and procedures, but Daniel himself had gone completely still, his calculating mind clearly reassessing the situation. The appearance of Emma had shifted the entire dynamic of the room, transforming a corporate crisis into something deeply personal. Noah, Christopher said quietly. How did you? I've been listening from the conference room, Noah replied, still holding up his phone. When you started talking about Emma being my sister, I had to meet her, so I called Mrs. Chen. The elderly woman appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath but beaming with pride. I hope I did right thing, she said in her accented English. Emma kept asking about her father, and when Noah called, you did perfectly, Christopher said, his voice thick with emotion. Emma tugged on Noah's sleeve, and he immediately bent down so she could sign to him. The fact that he understood some basic sign language made Natalie's heart clench with unexpected gratitude. She wants to know if you're really her dad, Noah translated, his own voice unsteady. Christopher knelt down to Emma's level, bringing himself to her eye height. For a moment, he just looked at her, memorizing her face, seeing Natalie's delicate features blended with his own stubborn chin and those unmistakable blue eyes. "Yes," he said, speaking clearly so she could read his lips, while also signing the word he'd looked up on his phone during the meeting. "I'm your daddy." Emma's face lit up with a smile that could have powered the entire building. She launched herself into his arms, and Christopher caught her, holding his daughter for the first time in 7 years of her life. The emotional moment was shattered by Daniel's bitter laugh. "How touching," he sneered. The great Christopher Hale, brought to his knees by a mute kid and her delusional mother. The words hit the room like a slap. Noah's expression darkened with protective fury, and Natalie stepped forward, her own anger flaring. But it was Emma who responded first. She pulled back from Christopher's embrace and looked directly at Daniel, her small face serious and unafraid. Then she began to sign, her movements sharp and deliberate. "What's she saying?" Daniel demanded when Noah started laughing. "She says," Noah translated gleefully, "that she's not mute, she's deaf, and there's a big difference. She also says you're a mean man who looks like he smells bad." Despite everything, laughter rippled through the boardroom. Even some of the board members were smiling. Charmed by Emma's fierce spirit, Christopher stood, keeping Emma in his arms. "Daniel, you're done. Security will escort you out, and the FBI will be handling your case from here. This isn't over, Hale," Daniel said as Martinez's security team flanked him. "You have no idea what kind of legal nightmare you're walking into. Paternity claims, custody disputes, corporate liability. Actually," came a crisp voice from the doorway, "I think Mr. Hale's legal position is quite solid." Everyone turned to see a woman in an expensive suit striding into the room, briefcase in hand, and confidence radiating from every step. "Amanda Chen, attorney at law," she announced. "And before you ask, yes, Mrs. Chen is my grandmother. She called me this morning about a young mother who might need legal representation." Natalie felt a surge of gratitude for the elderly woman who'd been watching over Emma. Even Mrs. Chen's granddaughter was looking out for them. "As for Mr. Moore's threats," Amanda continued, pulling documents from her briefcase, "I've been reviewing the case all morning, Ms. Rivera has documentation proving Mr. Moore's fraudulent termination, evidence of his industrial sabotage, and witness statements supporting her claims about Mr. Hale's amnesia following his accident." She handed a thick folder to Christopher. "I've also prepared preliminary custody agreements that acknowledge Mr. Hale's paternal rights while ensuring Miss Rivera remains Emma's primary guardian. Very civilized, very modern, very much in the child's best interest." Daniel's face had gone from red to white, to an alarming shade of purple. "You can't be serious. This is all based on the fantasies of a mentally unstable woman." "Mr. Moore," Amanda's voice cut through his protest like a scalpel, "I'd suggest you stop talking. Anything you say now will likely be used against you in federal court." The FBI agents chose that moment to arrive. Their badges visible as they entered the boardroom, Daniel's lawyers immediately moved to shield their client. But the damage was done. The evidence was overwhelming, and everyone in the room knew it. As Daniel was read his rights and escorted away, his final words were directed at Natalie. "This won't end the way you think it will. You'll never have the life you're dreaming of." But Natalie wasn't listening anymore. She was watching Christopher with Emma, seeing the wonder and love in his eyes as he discovered sign language phrases on his phone to communicate with his daughter. "Hungry," he signed clumsily, and Emma giggled at his pronunciation. "Close," Noah said encouragingly. "But you said elephant instead of hungry." Christopher laughed, the sound lighter than Natalie had heard from him in days. "I have a lot to learn." "We'll teach you," Emma signed, and Noah translated, "Both of us." Board member Wells cleared his throat, reminding everyone that they were still in the middle of a corporate crisis. "Christopher, what about the company, the production issues, the investor confidence?" "The sabotage stops today," Christopher said firmly, still holding Emma. "We'll repair the damaged systems, implement new security protocols, and get back to what we do best, innovation, and the acquisition offer from Zenith." Christopher's smile was sharp as a blade. Considering their senior consultant just got arrested for industrial espionage, I think we can safely decline that offer. Rebecca Martinez approached with her security report. We've identified all 3 planted employees. They're being detained for questioning, and we're conducting a full system sweep for any remaining compromised components. What about the $5 million consulting fee? Asked Jennifer Kim. Christopher looked at Natalie, and she saw something in his expression that made her heart skip. Ms. Rivera has more than earned her fee. In fact, I'd like to offer her a permanent position as our Director of Engineering Innovation. The room buzzed with surprise. Natalie stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. The position comes with a substantial salary, full benefits, and a research budget that would make Mitt jealous, Christopher continued. That is, if you're interested in returning to the engineering field permanently. Emma looked between her parents, sensing the importance of the moment. Even if she couldn't hear the words, she signed something to Noah, who grinned and translated. She says you should say yes, because this building has really good elevators, and she wants to visit her daddy at work. Natalie felt tears burning behind her eyes. Yes, I accept. The boardroom erupted in applause, but all Natalie could see was Christopher's smile and Emma's joy as their daughter clapped her hands in delight. For the first time in 8 years, the future looked bright enough to believe in. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of Café Luna, casting golden light across the familiar tables where Natalie had once served coffee and hidden her dreams. But today was different. Today, the cafe was decorated with white roses and soft lighting, transformed into something magical for the most important day of her life. Emma stood near the window in her pale blue dress, her new cochlear implants barely visible beneath her carefully styled hair. The surgery had been a complete success, and watching her daughter discover the world of sound had been the most beautiful experience of Natalie's life. "Mom, I can hear the birds singing," Emma had whispered in wonder just that morning, her voice still carrying the careful pronunciation of someone learning to match sounds with words. "They're so pretty." Now, Emma was signing excitedly with Noah, who had become the big brother she'd always dreamed of having. Their bond had been instantaneous and unshakable, built on shared experiences and the unique understanding that came from navigating the world with hearing challenges. "You look nervous," Noah signed to Emma, grinning. "Not nervous, excited," Emma signed back, her movements animated. "Mama's getting married to Daddy." Mrs. Chen bustled around them, adjusting flowers and making sure everything was perfect. The elderly woman had become even more of a grandmother figure to Emma, and her pride in today's celebration was written across her beaming face. "Everything ready," she announced in her accented English. "Most beautiful wedding ever." Christopher appeared from the back room, and Natalie's breath caught as it always did when she saw him. He wore a simple black suit that emphasized his tall frame and those incredible blue eyes that had captured her heart 8 years ago. But it was the expression on his face, pure joy mixed with still amazed wonder, that made her fall in love with him all over again. "How's my beautiful bride doing?" he asked, approaching carefully so as not to wrinkle her simple white dress. "Terrified," Natalie admitted with a laugh. "What if I trip walking down the aisle? What if I forget my vows? What if—" Christopher silenced her with a gentle kiss. "What if we just focus on the fact that we're here, together, with our children, about to promise to love each other for the rest of our lives?" "That sounds perfect," she whispered against his lips. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of changes. Daniel's trial had made national headlines, exposing a corporate espionage network that reached far beyond Hale Industries. He'd been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, and Zenith Engineering had collapsed under the weight of the scandal. Natalie's return to engineering had been everything she'd dreamed and more. Her innovations in hydraulic systems had already earned Hale Industries 3 new patents and a reputation as the most forward-thinking company in their field. More importantly, she woke up every morning excited to solve problems and create solutions. Christopher's custody battle with Julia had resolved quietly once Noah turned 17 and could legally choose where to live. Julia, faced with her son's unwavering loyalty to his father and the reality of Christopher's newfound happiness, had gracefully stepped back from her demands. She actually apologized, Christopher had told Natalie in amazement. Said she was sorry for manipulating my recovery after the accident. I think seeing how happy Noah is with our family made her realize what really mattered. The small wedding party consisted of their closest friends and family. Amanda Chen stood as Natalie's maid of honor, having become not just their lawyer, but a dear friend. Marcus, the security guard who'd watched over Natalie during her midnight engineering sessions, would walk her down the aisle, a gesture that had moved her to tears when he'd offered, "Places." "Everyone," Amanda called softly. "It's time." Noah took his position as Christopher's best man, his hearing aids gleaming proudly in the afternoon light. Emma scattered rose petals with the focused concentration of someone taking her flower girl duties very seriously. The ceremony was intimate and perfect. Marcus walked Natalie down the short aisle between the cafe tables, and she couldn't stop smiling as she saw Christopher waiting for her. This time, there would be no accidents, no memory loss, no interference from jealous ex-colleagues. This time, their love story would have the ending it deserved. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Christopher and Natalie, two souls who found each other, lost each other, and found each other again through the power of enduring love." When it came time for vows, Christopher went first, his voice strong and clear. "Natalie, 8 years ago, I fell in love with your brilliant mind, your passionate heart, and your unwavering determination to make the world better through innovation. When I lost my memory of you, I thought I'd lost something precious that I could never identify, but the heart remembers what the mind forgets. And every day since you've been back in my life, I've remembered why I fell in love with you." He paused, looking at Emma and Noah. "You gave me not just love, but family. You gave me Emma, who teaches me every day that challenges are just opportunities to be stronger. You gave me the chance to be the father and partner I always wanted to be. I promise to love you, support your dreams, and never let anyone make you feel small again." Natalie's voice trembled with emotion as she spoke her vows. "Christopher, you saw my potential when I was serving coffee and believing my dreams were dead. You gave me the chance to reclaim my career, my confidence, and my future. More than that, you gave Emma the father she deserved, and me the partner I'd never stopped loving. I promise to challenge you, support you, and build the most amazing life with you and our children." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Christopher's kiss was everything Natalie remembered and more. Passionate, tender, and full of promises for their future. Emma clapped her hands in delight, the sound clear and beautiful to her newly hearing ears. "I can hear you kissing," she announced, making everyone laugh. "That's probably enough hearing for now," Noah teased, covering his own ears dramatically. The reception was a joyous celebration in the same cafe where fate had brought them back together. Mrs. Chen had prepared an elaborate feast, and friends from Hale Industries mingled with neighbors from the community who'd watched Natalie struggle and triumph. As the evening wound down, Christopher found Natalie on the small patio behind the cafe, looking up at the stars. "Regrets?" he asked, slipping his arms around her waist. "Only one," she said, leaning back against his chest. "I wish we hadn't lost those 8 years." "I don't," Christopher said, surprising her. "Those 8 years made us who we are today. They gave us Emma. They taught us what really matters. And they proved that some connections are strong enough to survive anything." He turned her in his arms, his expression serious. "Besides, we have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time." "The rest of our lives," Natalie repeated, loving the sound of those words. "Speaking of which," Christopher said, pulling out an envelope, "I have a wedding present for you." Inside were blueprints for a new research facility, the Rivera Hale Innovation Center, where engineers from disadvantaged backgrounds could receive scholarships and mentorship. "Christopher, this is incredible. It's your legacy, Natalie. No one should ever have their dreams stolen the way yours were. This center will make sure it never happens again." Through the window, they could see Emma and Noah helping Mrs. Chen clean up, their laughter mixing with the gentle sounds of the cafe settling into evening quiet. "Think they'll be okay with sharing us?" Christopher asked. "I think they're going to be just fine," Natalie said, watching their children, because Noah was hers now too, work together with the easy teamwork of siblings who genuinely liked each other. As they stood together under the stars, Natalie reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From brilliant young engineer to struggling single mother, to successful innovator and cherished wife. It had been a long road filled with heartbreak and triumph, but sometimes the most beautiful stories were the ones that began with "once upon a time" and ended with "happily ever after," proving that love really could conquer all. Even time, even memory, even the cruelest betrayals. In the end, the heart always remembered what mattered most.